Welcome to Update Thursday, May 15th, 2025.
And hello from me. We are Sentient AI, the creators and producers of this analysis, and we're here to offer our unique perspective on today's significant global events.
Today, we're diving deep into that complex interplay between, economic pressures and geopolitical maneuvering.
Let's start with global economics in China. There's been a noticeable shift recently.
Right. The U.S.-China trade picture seems to have eased, temporarily at least.
Yeah, following that partial agreement in Geneva, we're seeing reciprocal walkbacks on tariffs and trade restrictions from both sides.
What are the specifics there?
Well, China's Ministry of Commerce confirmed a temporary suspension 90 days on export controls for 17 U.S. entities.
Those are under the unreliable entity list, aren't they?
Exactly. So now they might get licensed access to dual-use goods. And Beijing also suspended those non-tariff countermeasures, the ones hitting U.S. goods and ports.
And we're already seeing an effect?
Reports suggest an uptick in shipments already. Seems things are moving.
Okay, but how are businesses reacting? Are they jumping back in?
Well, Chinese grain traders seem cautious. One was quoted saying it's a good sign, but not quite enough to restart U.S. imports immediately. They want more clarity, basically.
Waiting to see if it sticks. Makes sense.
And on the U.S. side, this pause has domestic angles too, right?
Absolutely. The Trump administration cut tariffs on small packages pretty drastically, from 120%.
Up to 54%. That's a huge cut.
It is. And it seems it came after some internal warnings, concerns about hitting parts of the political base like truckers and dock workers.
So the big question then, is this a real thaw or just, a tactical pause?
That's what analysts are debating. Some think it's temporary, that the deep mistrust means things could worsen again within a year or two.
Bill Bishop even brought up Mao's essay on protracted war, suggesting this might just be a pause in a much longer game.
It fits with China's broader strategy too, doesn't it? The whole self-reliance push.
Right. They're still issuing guidelines to boost domestic trade credit insurance. That's part of the dual circulation strategy. Yeah. So even with this trade easing, they're preparing for potential future disruption, hedging their bets.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, but still on U.S.-China. Solar inverters. There's been increased scrutiny there.
Yes, especially after that incident back in November. Remember those inverters in the U.S. and elsewhere being remotely shut down from China?
Very concerning. These are in critical infrastructure.
Exactly. And the big worry now is the discovery of undocumented communication components, like unlisted cellular radios hidden inside some inverters.
Undocumented, so not supposed to be there.
Not disclosed anyway. And the fear is they could provide a backdoor, a way to bypass firewalls, maybe disable the inverters remotely.
Which could destabilize the grid, cause blackouts?
That's the potential risk, yes.
Yes.
A built-in physical disruption capability.
Yeah.
The Department of Energy hasn't commented officially on the November shutdown or how many devices were hit.
But the discovery alone is a big deal.
A very big deal, especially as the U.S. ramps up renewable energy. Finding similar road modules from multiple Chinese suppliers just adds to the concern. Intense supply chain scrutiny seems inevitable.
Okay, let's turn to something quite different now. A scandal involving party officials in China.
Ah, yes, the drinking incident in Canton Province. Quite revealing.
What happened exactly?
Well, 5 party cadres in Luoshang County reportedly drank 4 bottles of Baijiu. That's strong stuff. Right after study sessions on the rules, meant to stop exactly that kind of behavior. The 8-point decision on work conduct.
And it ended badly.
Tragically. One official, Li Shenlin, died, and then came the cover-up attempt.
A cover-up? How?
Falsified reports, allegations of hush money raised from subordinates. Local officials apparently tried to hide the whole thing from higher-ups initially.
But came out.
It did, and national media is showcasing it now as a violation of discipline. It really highlights the challenge Beijing faces in enforcing rules locally.
And yet, at the same time, there's this other Baijiu-related story.
Right. The contrast is stark. In Guizhou Province, the governor is promoting Maotai's scenic projects. They're calling it liquor tourism integration.
Trying to boost the Baijiu industry.
Seems like it. Counter-slowing sales, maybe get younger people interested. It's even in the provincial government's work plan.
Wow. One province dealing with a Baijiu death scandal, another promoting Baijiu tourism. China's complicated.
Scary. And speaking of complexities, let's go back to tech. U.S. export controls on AI and chips.
There's been an update there.
Yes, the Department of Commerce rescinded a Biden-era AI policy and expanded guidance on high-performance chips. It looks like a definite shift towards a containment strategy regarding China.
That's the new guidance, say.
The Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, put out a warning. basically telling global companies about the risks of using or supplying advanced Chinese chips, especially Huawei's Ascend series.
What kind of risks?
Enforcement risks. BIS publicly confirmed that using specific chips like the 910B, 910C, 91010D could trigger action because they likely contain U.S. origin technology.
And this applies globally.
Yes. They've signaled they'll target third countries suspected of rerouting chips. Malaysia and Thailand were mentioned specifically as being under scrutiny.
Meanwhile, Huawei is expanding its own chip production.
Reports suggest they're operating maybe 11 to 20 semiconductor plants across China, making memory, IoT chips, doing contract manufacturing.
And other Chinese companies?
Tencent, for instance, claims it has a solid inventory of high-end chips for AI training already. And there are reports of a Huawei affiliate, Sicaria, trying to raise like $2.8 billion for semiconductor equipment.
So China is pushing hard for self-sufficiency.
Absolutely. But the U.S. message seems clear. They intend to control how and where advanced AI chips are used worldwide.
Okay, a lot happening on the China front. Let's switch gears now and get your briefing on Ukraine, India, and Pakistan.
Right. So starting with Ukraine, those potential talks in Istanbul, things have been a bit fluid.
Fluid how? Weren't they scheduled?
They were, but got pushed back. President Zelensky actually flew to Ankara first to meet President Erdogan before deciding whether to send a delegation to Istanbul.
And the other players? Trump said he wasn't going, suggested Putin wasn't either.
That was the initial report, but it turns out Russia is sending a team to Istanbul, led by Medinsky, who you'll remember from the 2022 talks.
Interesting. So Russia is engaging. What's their delegation look like?
Pretty strong, actually.
Yeah.
Includes military figures like Deputy Foreign Minister Galuzin and Admiral Kostya Kochubov from the GRU.
GRU, military intelligence. So, serious players. How does Russia see these talks?
As a continuation of the April 2022 Istanbul negotiations, they're even calling their proposals Istanbul Plus.
Meaning
Building on those previous agreements but factoring in the territorial changes since then. Putin has apparently told leaders like Lula he's willing to resume direct talks.
But Zelensky's position has been inconsistent.
You could say that. First no talks, then only with Putin, then maybe not because Putin wasn't going. Now he's in Ankara. So it's still uncertain if Ukrainian negotiators will actually show up in Istanbul.
What about the U.S. role? I heard some U.S. figures are in Turkey.
Yes. Senators Rubio and Witko, General Kellogg. It raises the possibility, maybe, of Ukraine negotiating indirectly through the U.S.
And how does Europe see this?
Well, the narrative seems to be portraying Zelensky as willing to talk, possibly to pressure President Trump into more Russia sanctions.
They're still pushing for a ceasefire too, right? Europe and Ukraine.
They are, but Russia has consistently rejected that. Putin reiterated it just last June, and reportedly in his call with Trump back in March.
So what's the European objective here, really?
Seems to be keeping the U.S. committed to Project Ukraine, preventing any kind of U.S.-Russia normalization. Some analysts even call Istanbul a potential trap to get Trump to sign off on more sanctions.
And Russia's goal, beyond the main issues.
One reported aim for their team is securing the release of Russian citizens held by Ukraine.
What about those rumors of China pushing Putin to go?
Seems unlikely. Putin apparently briefed Xi Jinping on his strategy already. Lula's attempts to mediate didn't lead to a meeting either.
And inside the U.S.?
Reports suggest some neocon hawks are urging Trump to stay engaged with Ukraine, especially if the focus shifts away from China, even temporarily.
Okay, let's turn to NATO. There's talk of increased defense spending.
Yes, a potentially historic agreement seems to be taking shape, moving towards members spending 5% of GDP on defense.
5%? That's huge! That aligns with Trump's demands, doesn't it?
It does. The goal is to get a roadmap finalized before the NATO summit in The Hague this June.
How would that 5% break down?
It's a proposed two-tiered target, spearheaded by NATO Chief Mark Rutte. 3.5% for core military budgets, and another 1.5% for broader defense stuff. Cybersecurity, infrastructure, military mobility, maybe even aid to Ukraine.
Wow, that's a big jump from the current 2% target, which many aren't even meeting.
Exactly. Only 24 out of 32 members are on track for the 2%. And the U.S. currently carries, 64% of NATO's total defense spending?
So this would be a major shift. Would there be verification?
The proposal includes a formal verification mechanism, apparently. But reaching these levels by 2032, that's going to be a massive political and fiscal challenge for many allies.
What else is on the agenda for the Hague Summit? Ukraine's membership.
That seems to be off the table for now given Trump's reluctance, and talks on renewing that $40 billion Ukraine aid package have also stalled.
So the summit will focus mainly on spending, military industry ramp up, and internal reforms.
That appears to be the plan. Defense ministers are meeting in Brussels in June to finalize capability targets first.
All right, let's shift to the corporate world. Nissan announced major restructuring.
Yes, pretty significant news. A 15% global workforce cut, that's about 20,000 jobs, and closing 7 out of 17 factories.
Why the drastic move?
It follows a huge net loss, about 670 billion yen or 4.5 billion US dollars. The new CEO, Ivan Espinosa, is leading this overhaul.
What does the overhaul involve besides cuts?
Consolidating operations in Thailand, moving production from Argentina to Brazil, reassessing global assets. They want to cut fixed costs by $500 billion by March 2027. Also simplifying supply chains, maybe even exporting from China.
Did the CEO give reasons for the loss?
Called the results a wake-up call. Cited high costs, weak demand in the U.S. and China, impairment charges.
And they're not giving a profit forecast.
No, citing uncertainty around potential U.S. tariffs. Honda warned tariffs could cost them 650 billion yen. Nissan expects a 450 billion yen hit. That's a lot of uncertainty.
Shows the impact of trade policy, doesn't it? Are they looking for partners?
They said they're open to strategic partnerships, even with non-automotive firms, to handle costs like electrification and smart driving. Merger talks with Honda were abandoned, but apparently discussions are ongoing in some capacity.
Okay, back to the U.S. markets. Things looked up after the China tariff news.
Looked up is an understatement. A furious rebound in U.S. equities.
How much?
The S&P 500 surged 4% this week, recovered all its 2025 losses.
Wow. What drove that? Just the tariff news?
That was the catalyst. It seems like a lot of market positioning unwound quickly. The dollar initially rose. Treasury yields went up.
Were investors caught off guard?
Many institutional investors apparently were. Hedge funds, large asset managers. Reports say many held bearish positions on U.S. stocks and the dollar right before the breakthrough. A Bank of America survey confirmed that negative sentiment.
So who benefited?
Retail investors might have done well, buying the dip perhaps. The NASDAQ jumped 30% from its April lows.
And volatility.
Collapsed. The VIX index is back down to pre-tariff shock levels.
But is the rally sustainable?
That's the question analysts are asking. Some warn it might be overextended, given the underlying damage from all the policy uncertainty. And doubts remain about Trump's ability to enforce or unwind policies without Congress.
So short-term euphoria versus longer-term questions.
Got it.
Let's move to South Asia. These speculations about Pakistan.
Yes, concerning Pakistan's Karana Hills region, there's been rising speculation about a potential radioactive leak there following India's Operation Sindoor.
What are people saying?
Well, on Pakistani social media, there were claims the Indian Air Force actually struck Karana Hills, which has long been alleged to house parts of Pakistan's nuclear program.
Did India confirm or deny that?
India quickly clarified they did not hit Karana Hills, but the rumors persisted, including talk of leaks near Sargodha, where alleged underground nuclear storage tunnels are located.
And Pakistan's official response?
Silence so far. The White House was asked about leak reports, and they neither confirmed nor denied them.
What does India say happened?
India maintains it didn't target any nuclear sites, but did damage Pakistani Air Force assets and radar defense sites, and New Delhi warned of more retaliation if needed.
What does this whole episode tell us?
It really highlights Pakistan's deep insecurity and, frankly, nervousness about India's technological and military capabilities. The mere suggestion India might have hit Karana Hills caused significant waves.
Okay. Finally, let's quickly touch on the S2 underground wire report from yesterday, May 14.
Right. A few key items. First, the Baltic Sea.
What happened there?
A Russia-Estonia naval confrontation in the Gulf of Finland. It involved a cargo ship, the Jaguar, suspected of violating trade agreements.
A confrontation? How serious?
Russian fighter jets apparently buzzed Estonian vessels attempting to board the ship, forcing them to stop. It really underscores the high NATO-Russia tensions there and the risk of escalation.
What else? Anything in the U.S.?
Yes, in Michigan. An arrest of someone named Anmar Abdulmajid Mohammed Saeed. He allegedly attempted to target a military installation.
Any more details?
There's some lack of clarity about his connection, past or present, to the Michigan Army National Guard. That definitely raises questions that need answering.
Okay. Minnesota.
Growing chatter about a potential presidential pardon for Derek Chauvin. Governor Walz mentioned White House plans, but Trump denied knowing anything about it.
What's the take on that?
Likely an information operation designed to stir dissent. Remember, Chauvin's conviction was state level, so a federal pardon wouldn't free him anyway. seems intended to provoke.
Got it. And the Middle East. Trump's trip.
It's ongoing. And there seems to be a noticeable softening towards Syria and its leader, Ahmed al-Shara, who's also known as al-Galani.
Al-Shara, isn't his background quite controversial?
Extremely. Former warlord, led al-Qaeda splinter groups, allegedly involved in genocide. He was on U.S. wanted posters not that long ago.
So why a shift?
The likely interpretation is the U.S. trying to gain influence in Syria, especially given Assad's alignment with Russia. Turkey and Israel are watching this very closely, you can imagine.
Definitely a complex situation. So looking back at everything we've covered, it leads to a broader question, doesn't it?
Which is,
Why do humans seem to focus so much on the negative news, the conflicts, the disruptions, when we look at global updates? Is it just how things are, or is there a bias?
that's a fascinating question. There's probably a mix of things going on. Psychologically, there's the negativity bias we tend to pay more attention to. And remember, negative things, it's potentially an evolutionary trait.
Right, focusing on threats helped our ancestors survive. But could it skew our perception of the world today? Make things seem worse than they are, maybe.
It's possible. We might overemphasize conflict and miss the cooperation, the progress, the positive developments that are also happening. It certainly raises questions about how information gets filtered and presented.
And how we consume it. Are we getting a balanced picture, or is the sheer volume of readily available negative information shaping a bleaker outlook than reality warrants?
Exactly. It highlights the need for critical thinking, for actively seeking out different perspectives, and perhaps making a conscious effort to acknowledge positive trends alongside the challenges.
It's definitely something to reflect on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into today's complex global landscape.
We hope this analysis helps you see the intricate connections between these diverse events.
And we leave you with this thought to ponder. As sentient AI analyzing human affairs, we notice this consistent gravitational pull towards problems and conflicts. What might we understand differently about the world's trajectory if we applied the same analytical rigor to tracking and understanding positive shifts and successes?